All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. Today's webinar will be to seamlessly extend your data center to the cloud with Commvault on AWS. My name is Joseph Fontes. I am a Partner Solutions Architect today with Amazon Web Services. Today's speakers will also include Brian Brockway, who is Chief Technology Officer for Commvault, and Uday Jalagam, who is the Senior Storage Platform Engineer for Logitech. During today's discussion, we're going to be starting off with backup and recovery on AWS. And we look at why it is that we're embarking on this particular discussion. And I think it's because when we look at a lot of the migration stories to AWS, what we see is storage backup being one of the initial stories, those initial narratives on the journey to AWS and infrastructure as a service adoption. And it's really that ease of extending your capabilities, extending the your on-prem infrastructure to the cloud, and the low barrier to entry and using AWS for those particular services, whether it's your storage, your backup, or just expanding your storage capabilities. When we look at some of the challenges, why is it that customers and partners are looking towards AWS as a solution and the AWS partner ecosystem? We look at what are the challenges of managing backups, especially in a local environment. Many times you'll be using manual backup solutions, and there's an associated technical debt there when you manage backup solutions, especially in a manual configuration. You have to ensure things like, do the backups exist? Just because I, instruct them to run, have they indeed stored correctly? Is that backup file of sufficient size? Is it corrupted? How often do I need to test these backups? The backup destination, is it going to be full? Is it going to be full soon? What's my process for rotating those backups? And there's also an associated cost with that. And this isn't just the cost of the storage, but also the cost to manage that storage. How often are you handling the lifecycle replacement for the drives associated with that storage? And then staffing for, 24/7 availability of that infrastructure. And then also the compliance standards. AWS makes our compliance standards publicly available with attestation information at aws.amazon.com/compliance. But when you look at local solutions, what are your compliance standards? There's associated paperwork. There is, there's a lot of effort in place to not just meet those standards and compliance standards, but also to ensure that, you are focusing your expertise in the right areas and your effort in the right areas. So as far as the benefits of using AWS, if you're already running infrastructure on AWS, you have an integrated environment. So if you're running AWS EC2 instances, the capability to perform a backup there is quite easily built into the platform with something as simple as a snapshot. Different security models and standards. When you look at what are some of the data encryption standards available, you can use AWS solutions. You can use your own solutions. Customers and partners are always free to use their own encryption standards on the platform. When we look at things like maintenance, AWS handles a lot of the back-end maintenance. So really it's up to the customers and partners to identify how it is that you'll use the platform to meet your needs. When we look at what amount of space is available to use, if available for use, AWS handles elasticity, scalability to ensure that S3 will always have space for your storage requirements, and then operating at low cost. Customers and partners are really able to take advantage of the AWS operation at scale to bring down the cost of your own storage and backup solutions. AWS is referred to, we refer to it as a customer-driven organization. And really what we do is we take feedback from customers and from partners and use that to build AWS solutions to identify, what are the priorities for our customers, for our partners, and that becomes the priority for AWS. We receive a lot of feedback from the AWS partner ecosystem. And so we use that feedback to provide solutions that are as easy as possible to configure, but at the same time make up the building blocks of AWS solutions. So when you look at a partner solution that's built on top of AWS, they're really able to leverage the infrastructure to provide a more tuned experience for partners. So when you have a backup partner, which is what our reference today, you find that the solution is tuned for the needs of those performing that particular function, which is backups. And so they're able to leverage the capabilities of AWS and make it as easy as possible for backup customers and for storage customers to build in solutions that allow for incremental backups, block level backups, allow for asynchronous replication and for rapid recovery in a cost-effective way. AWS has a number of solutions available to identify what is your encryption option, what policy and lifecycle management do you apply to each of your backup solutions, and a lot of times when you look at a partner solution like Commvault, they're able to simplify a lot of that overhead administrative task and a lot of those decisions that need to be made into a way that's more easy for customers to understand, implement, and automate in order to meet the needs of their platform. And when we look at something as crucial as, information storage, backups, how it is that you're using the platform, one of the things we always start off with as far as conversation is the AWS shared responsibility model. Here we look at that which is the responsibility of AWS with regards to security and that which is the responsibility of the customer with regards to security. So the standard statement is that AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud and customers are responsible for security in the cloud. And really what that means is, as an example, AWS is responsible for the physical security of AWS infrastructure. So, for instance, we have a data center, we have a region in Oregon. You can't just wander around Oregon, find an AWS data center, walk around, or even walk around the perimeter of it. We're not told where these availability zones are, specifically where the region is. We don't have logical access to these facilities. And really, third-party auditors would be the only individuals outside of AWS staff with the logical need to get into these facilities that would have access to these facilities. And then, as far as what are the customer responsibilities, this is really an area where the partner ecosystem shines and solutions like Commvault really shine. And this is in securing the way that you use AWS. Securing, if you're running an instance, it would be ensuring that, you have your instance firewall running, your operating system firewall, that you harden your firewall so that, your instance is only listening on ports that are absolutely required. And specifically, if you're storing information, you're storing backups, that you're utilizing AWS policies, that you're using data encryption, that you're using the services and you're utilizing best practices for security within the AWS infrastructure. When we look at, some of the use cases for backup and recovery, we really want to avoid data loss. We want to provide, recovery for our audit and compliance standards as well as for business, and we want to avoid logical errors. And so what we do is we provide an option to extend your on-prem solution as well as a solution for your AWS storage and backup needs. And so, it's all about managing the foundational support that you have for your organization to build solutions. And in this particular case, we're looking at Commvault, an AWS APN ecosystem partner, providing a solution that leverages AWS in order to create a very customer-centric storage and backup solution. We talk a little bit about what are the foundational services of AWS used to build storage solutions. Amazon S3, which is the first AWS service released. This is our object store, which stores trillions of objects as it stands. Partners able to leverage this service and its features and capabilities to build storage solutions on top of. And this is maybe a primary entry point for a backup and storage solutions option. If you have let's say data that you're willing to archive, it doesn't need to be accessed immediately. You can use something like Amazon Glacier, which provides a more low cost and yet extremely durable storage solution. And then AWS Storage Gateway, which allows that hybridized solution to be able to manage storage between your on-prem location and AWS, still using the same logical connectors that you use with Amazon S3. And then, if we have just these vast amounts of information that we need to load into AWS, what are our opportunities there? What are our options? We have Snowball, Snowball Edge, and Snowmobile. These are differentiators of how much data do you need to get into AWS, and is it manageable to upload that information, or or is it just easier to manually send this? In these particular solutions, it's we're going to pack up either a vehicle or a device and send those over to AWS for inclusion into the compute platform. And now I will hand it over to Brian Brockaway. Brian?
Thank you, Joe. So we go ahead and click onto the next one here. There we go. So I think from the great introduction that Joe gave us on the new possibilities of what AWS provides, that's something that Commvault as a company has been looking at and working with them for many years, of saying, how do we take a lot of our expertise from the enterprise data management and data protection space, integrate and marry it up to the AWS value proposition to say, how do we offer some customers some really leading edge solutions that are designed to not only protect data sets in the cloud, but bring and connect your on-prem environments into the cloud to kind of make it look like a natural extension. Commvault as a company has been a market leader in this space from data protection and others for many years. Most importantly, though, as we started a lot of our integrations a number of years ago with cloud in some of the storage first type models, we've been quickly expanding to not just putting data sets into cloud storage as an alternative copy, but more importantly, how do we unlock that data and bring it off into a fully usable form? One of the recent surveys we just did in the Commvault user base, we have a collection of users worldwide that kind of participate with us and tell us what they're doing and how they're doing it. You can see a couple of my new statistics on the bottom over here. The surveys just came in last month. Already, we're seeing about 100 petabytes of cloud usage across our base today. That's up over the last 5 quarters by almost 250%. And this goes against a larger environment of, and we all know in many of our organizations, there's lots of data copies. There's about 7 exabytes out there today. What we're seeing more and more customers adopt into is the new dynamics of the cloud, some of the new economics, and the ease and simplicity of being able to take those data sets into the cloud is now a very attractive target. And that's where we're seeing this massive rapid adoption phase happening inside there. Commvault as a customer, or excuse me, Commvault as a vendor, has not only established a great execution record in the space and a high trust value against our 50,000 plus customers, but really it's a lot of the execution we've done in embracing the cloud with a fully integrated kind of native approach is what's really kind of put us at the lead of the pack. And this is increasing where we see more and more organizations coming to us and saying, can you help me get to the cloud and start to really fully utilize the cloud in a variety of net new use cases. So kind of playing off some of the things that Joe started with before, where we see a lot of our intersection points in customer conversations, very similar to the one that Uday will go into with Logitech coming up here, is how do we enable them to really take advantage of some of these new operations in the cloud, whether it's some of the new economics coming in and being able to cut some of the legacy costs of what they were doing in copy management on site, getting rid of data sets that are sitting idle inside a salt mine in some vaulted solution and nobody can ever access or use the data. If I can now bring it off into the cloud environment, it's fully accessible, it's fully fully available for utilization, and that's where you can add a lot of new value to it of doing things like search and analytics to say, can I actually start to employ that data set for other workloads? It may be dev test, it may be DR testing, or it may even be things like search and compliance. This is where we see a lot of customers coming back and saying this is really starting to break open the whole idea of IT agility, of being able to fully utilize the cloud for both its storage and compute options together in a very simplified manner. And that's really where we spend most of our time in integration saying, how do we make this a seamless process? So with that, let me kind of click ahead here and start to look at probably 4 of the top use cases we see in some of these intersection points. As Joe pointed out, one of the primary ones is a lot of the backup from on-prem into cloud environments. So getting rid of some of those infamous off-site DR tape copies and others out there to say if I can move it efficiently, secure it, deduplicate it, and put it into the cloud storage, not only can I get economic benefits from that operation, but now I can really start to use the cloud as a DR recovery site. Coming back in to say I not only have a copy of my data, can I come over and start to kind of move it to the right-hand side of my use cases over here to say if I can affect DR recovery there, I can actually go back in and check and increase my cost savings by consolidating more and more processes we had in the business. So it's not just the backup copies, but secure index backup copies in the cloud now open up more possibilities of other use cases I can really start to embrace in the organization, have a much higher payback, and really be able to more fully utilize the cloud as an advantage place to go off and do exceptional work. One of the other keys we see inside there is not just things like DR testing, but can I also come over with those data sets in the cloud and start to offer them up to my end users in a very seamless process to go back in and recover out instances of data. It may be for some dev test purposes. It may be to reinstitute a database instance in the cloud so I can tie it off for some things like data analytics and search. So there's a lot of new possibilities, and it all comes down to if I can take my data sets, synchronously connect them into the cloud, keep it secure and seamless, and make it very simplified for my users, I can make some really big impact statements to the business. How we go about doing that comes down to some of those integration points. So as Joe lined out earlier, if we look at my picture in front of us right now, on the left-hand side, this is a very common kind of approach that we do with a lot of customers in the enterprise workloads. Everything from virtual machines and applications and databases, file systems, large file systems, big data environments of Hadoop and others, snapshots and copies and things like that out there. By taking those data sets, creating those index backup copies in my disk pool on site, what we're able to do inside there is from that same infrastructure, the backup infrastructure on site, go in and seamlessly copy and deposit those copies over into the S3 pool. So there's no gateway machines needed in this use case here. I'm able to deduplicate the data to keep it not only efficient on the transfers, but also in the storage conditions on the other side. And I'm able to also encrypt the data at capture. So any data movement that is traversing through my system over the internet into the S3 pool, into the Glacier pool inside there is all secure and encrypted. So that way you're able to ensure there's no opportunities for some data to get left to the side and some compliance people to come over and make your afternoon quite horrendous out there. when we move that data into the cloud, and this is where a lot of our other integrations have come to new launch points, is not just having that as a stored copy, but coming in to say, can I now go back and recover that out into a full workload? So some of the new capabilities we've introduced is things like what we refer to as a V2V context. I may be backing up VMware virtual machines back on premise. I stage all those copies off into my S3 pool as off-site version copies. Then I would like to go back and recover them back up to be able to execute DR-type tasks inside there. We do all the conversion work. That's all the integration we've done with the AWS team to go back in. You pick the machines you want. We'll go back, we'll recover them, and convert them up into complete EC2 instances up on top. If you have other workloads that did not start as a virtualization container, same process. We have a lot of the integration to go off and create the EC2 instances you need on the cloud side, synchronize and drop the new data sets inside there, set up the configuration, set up the security models, and ensure you get a very seamless outcome for your end users. That same kind of capability can also work not only from a on-prem coming in, but to Joe's earlier points, a lot of the workloads that have already migrated and are now running in the cloud, that's, again, where some of our integration comes into play to say, how do we use those EBS snap pools to come in, do snapshot management so you have application-consistent snapshots inside the EBS system so I can effect faster, easier recovery. In some cases, if I need to take that out and I would like to propagate that off to a S3 copy to put some longer-term life cycle, or if I also want to stage that down to Glacier, the nice policy managements we use on top fit in and execute all those different operations inside AWS. So this becomes a very natural extension of your policy management, tying both the on-prem side to the on-cloud side to meet in the middle with a nice seamless kind of model inside there. When we come back in and look at a couple of those use cases we talked about earlier, this is where some of those key benefits come to bear. So for example, if we're looking at some of your on-prem data sets, I have 100 terabytes of deduplicated, backed up data I have sitting on-prem over here. I'd like to go over and attach this to the cloud. This doesn't become a large science experiment. In many cases, it's do I have the WAN connectivity? Do I have my S3 bucket? Let me go set it up inside there. You go tell our policies, here's the cloud library. We're going to go target that data to. And we'll go in and replicate all that deduplicated data directly off into that S3 bucket for you. So a nice, clean, easy process. As more bandwidth is needed, or let's say your networks start to get a little choppy on you, as that all happens in production, that's where the resiliency of the Commvault model comes into play. So we're very resilient. If things drop out, we'll pick up that change and we'll go back and ensure you get the job done automatically inside there. More importantly, it's not just using deduplication to ensure a small footprint, but like I said earlier, that encryption comes into play there because as soon as data exits your organization in the on-prem environment, that's where your security people get hyper concerned to ensure, do I have protection that follows that data anywhere it traverses to on the back end? And by wrapping that encryption, like Joe said earlier, we can wrap it on the front end. We have some of the integration points even with the key management services inside AWS. So different ways of saying, how do I want to affect and manage the environment? And that way you get the secure transfers and all the data at rest is also in a secure protected form. Looking to some of the Snap and the other backup options inside the cloud. So now that I have production workloads running inside the cloud, and this goes the gambit from whether we're talking about some RDS volumes, where I'm doing some RDS instances, can I do Snap and replication and control points inside there to ensure my DBAs are not overusing the system because it can become costly if it goes beyond your SLAs. By the same token, am I ensuring any of the work that we are doing up inside the cloud is now fully protected? Your compliance policies follow the data to the cloud, so anything you were doing on-prem for a 30-day recovery kind of an SLA inside there, that data set moving to the cloud does not divorce you of that need. And that's what we find many organizations coming in to say, I need a good top-down policy-based control to make sure as things become portable and move from one system to the other system or back and forth, do I ensure I have the right level of control affected inside there. In some of the other instances, when I'm starting to move data and workloads into the cloud, this is where some of our things like our migration to cloud options come into play. This could be the VM case I talked about earlier, or even if I'm doing things like databases. I may have a collection of online SQL databases. I have a dev test team that would like to take one instance out and automatically create it as a workload inside the cloud and use it for 2 weeks for a project and manage it and then recycle it when it's done. These are some of those nice instances or the orchestration options that we extend into the AWS environment to make it very seamless for you. And kind of at the end of the whole thing, doing a lot of integration and automation is a fantastic set of outcomes for users. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure does management have oversight and control. Where are data sets moving? Who's using what workloads inside there? If we have some workloads that don't need to be used on an ongoing basis, can I automatically retire them? And more importantly, can I put them all back into a nice SLA reporting mechanism so I can go back to my senior management team to show how effective we are doing in our objectives to fully utilize the cloud and affect some of those positive outcomes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Uday, and he can walk us through the example of how he's been using both of our technologies in a live case over here.
Thanks, Brian. Hello, everyone. I'm Uday from Logitech. So I work with the storage, backups, virtualization, and also involved working with the cloud. So let me start. Before I go with what you came here for, let me start with something about Logitech. Yeah, so let me go to slide here. Okay, yeah. So some of you know we founded in 1981, and we have a presence in a lot of countries, more than 100 countries out there. A lot of people know us as a computer peripheral company, and we are very great at that, and mouse and keyboard. Now we are also doing exceptionally well in Bluetooth speakers. We are one of the top contender in the market. And also we are booming and doing exceptionally well in gaming, home, and office products. So that is the basic. And let me tell you the basic principle of designing the products in Logitech. We always think what the value we are giving to the customer before designing any product, which is a great thing. And so always customer satisfaction and the value to the customer is main here. So we have multiple brands in Logitech. Logitech is our core brand, and Logi G, which is produce gaming devices, and UE, which is speakers and earphones, which are very great and exceptionally well. And recently we acquired JBoard, which is wireless earphones, which is very great products out there. So let me go to the main thing, which why we came here. The actual challenges before we got introduced to AWS and Commvault was the flexibility and the complexity of the hardware which we had. So it is very hard to manage the hardware in the local data center, since it takes a lot of time to purchase, build, and maintain them, and it's not flexible as well. So if you need some hardware immediately, it will take 3 months to get a lot of approvals and purchase them, deploy them. So it's not flexible. That's one of the main challenge we had. And also, so it always needs precise planning, and so we can't go wrong because it is not flexible. So if you are over purchased or under purchased or under the resources, you can't immediately go further, or you can't immediately acquire more hardware because it takes a lot of time. And also we have multiple data centers across the globe, multiple offices. Some are small and some are big. So we was not having everything needs different planning, different dealing with the different vendors over there, and it was always hard to procure hardware and maintain them, and interacting with the multiple vendors for different purposes. So those are the basic challenges we had. So then we came to AWS. So definitely the AWS was the strongest among the partners, and also it has presence in a lot of places where we need the resources. So that's the main reason we choose the AWS. So it was already stable, and it was already everybody believed in AWS. So that's the reason. And so it's when we so there are a different solution like a virtualization, but even virtualization have a lot of limitations, which is like you have to always plan in advance. So you can't plan in whenever you require. So it's always advanced planning required even for virtualization. But in the case of cloud, you always have flexibility of creating the resources, or removing the resources whenever you want. So that is the great flexibility we have with the AWS. And it is easy to deploy, so it has multiple options and multiple scales of hardware what we need. So if we need like a simple small one for the small business, a small project, then we have option over there. And if you need like a highly scalable system, we have there. If you need tomorrow on a different server and with a different configuration, we have over there. So we can always believe that. So we can go with that at any time. So another thing is the storage. So storage is always concern for most of us. Like it needs a lot of planning over there, and there are a lot of things which come into place when you plan the storage. So it have options of multiple different kind of storage. We have faster storage there, and we have also cheaper storage like S3 over there. So and it's unlimited. You can get whatever storage you want at any time. And the other reason is it has presence in all the data center places where we need the infrastructure. So we have AWS has presence in all the places. So it made our life easy, and it has the less latency between our data centers to the AWS data centers. So which is strongly forced us to go with the AWS. So why Commvault? So so actually the main reason for the Commvault is it's very simple to manage, and it's a single place to do. You want to do the backup, you want to do the replication, you want to protect different agents, different applications. It's a single place. You want to manage the cloud backup, so it's a single place. There is no settings we have to go and do from the client side and media agent side, and so it's a single place. CommCell, we go there and manage everything from the same place. So it is always simple and easy for the engineers to manage that. And the another thing is so the automation capabilities. So with the current cloud, and it is very agile, we have to remove the server tomorrow and create another server tomorrow. So there is a lot of agility with the cloud and the different options we have here. So with the Commvault, we have that options, like they have different APIs and REST services and workflows, which will allow us to do do automate the stuff which we require for the agility we have with the cloud and whatever the different applications we have. So that is the another one. And also the deduplication capability that Commvault has is very exceptional. So I personally like it very much, and it gives us a very great data reduction with minimal impact on the systems. So it's a great technology, and I love it the way it reduces the data and still does the backups and restore with the same speed as like it's doing regularly. And it sometimes improve when you're doing different kind of deduplication, like client-side deduplication, which reduce the amount of data you send over the network, which is exceptionally reduced the amount of time it takes for the backup if your network is your bottleneck. So so another thing is the support. They have great support. So I'm working with the Commvault from 8 years. I worked with multiple organizations, multiple organizations, very large to medium and small. So the way whenever I interacted with the Commvault support, it was the same response, and it's very great. So they treat, I'm not sure what is their model inside though, but they treat all the customers same, and it is very great. And they definitely escalate the issues to the respective people, and they don't hesitate to escalate to even developers when they need it. It's the only company I spoke with multiple developers. So that's how they escalate, and they try to understand what is our problem there. So if so one can't understand, they don't hesitate to move it to the other guys who have the more knowledge, which is really great. So why Commvault on AWS? Definitely Commvault is the one of the best and great product which is tightly integrated with the AWS. So so we can leverage. We don't have to do any extra steps, so that it already there, everything is there in the Commvault, which we need to back up to the AWS or back up from the AWS. So that is the main advantage for us there. And which obviously it's very hard to manage the tapes. Obviously it's almost gone in most of the cases, and even the on-site hardware, the disk is it's always hard to manage. So when it's initially active and you are doing the backup, you might think it's okay, but when it get cold and the storage is full, like you keeping the data simply out there and doing all the maintenance required for the hardware in the data center, which is very hard, and we should always keep it up and running, even though there is no need of it, unless we need a restore, which is very rare in most of the cases. But we have to always maintain it and treat it like important thing. So which will be like take a lot of our resources and time. So with the Commvault on AWS, it completely eliminate all those stress and like work from us, and they take care of it, which is exceptional. Yeah, and also, as I mentioned, that it is tightly integrated with the AWS. So it has direct communication with the S3. It understands the S3 IA, and also the Glacier recently. So and it has a lot of API integrations with handling instances and RDS. So it's definitely tightly coupled with the AWS, and with all this, definitely there was a cost saving. So now we have multiple options, so where we need to back up. So whether I want to back up primary copy to the RDS, or if I want to switch it to the Glacier, and also if I want to switch it to the S3, so which is a cheaper option, right? So I have options there with the S3 and S3 IA, which is introduce later, which for the infrequent access, which is obviously fine for our backup data. We saved a lot of cost over there. I think it comes in the next slide, the percentage we saved. So there is definitely a lot of cost savings in respect to the maintenance, hardware, purchase, support, and also the main thing is maintenance and managing it. That like we always need the resources with the right knowledge to manage even the old, since we are keeping the backup data for a long times. So some of the technologies would be very old, and so managing them would be like a lot of costs. So with the AWS, Commvault on AWS, we don't have to worry about them. So it's obviously easy for them. It's easy for us and less costly. Yeah. So so after this one, like we are flexible now, so we don't have to plan anything in advance. So we can plan it as and then, like we can create a server in like few minutes and sometimes few seconds, and configure the backups for them in like a few seconds. So if you introduce any new data center somewhere in like in AWS, then all I have to do is like install some agent there and you know, use the S3 there. I don't have to do procurement, all those legacy stuff we used to do. Yeah, and so it's obviously highly scalable. So I don't know what is their limit, but I don't think we ever reach that. But we can always grow however we want, or if you want to reduce it, like we can definitely reduce. So if we need some servers for the small project for over 6 months, and we can always use that. And also we save a lot of money with when you don't use it, like in the night or you in the weekends, whatever. You can shut down them and save money with that. So we have that flexibility with the AWS. And yeah, so once Commvault supported the standard IA, S3 IA, which is infrequent access, we straight away we was doing the backups to S3 that time, so we was paying except amount of money, and with the IA, so we flat after just changing the small settings, we reduced the cost to 50%, since it's great from the AWS storage model. And also currently we are testing the Glacier. So I think if it fits into our requirements, definitely we're going to save even more and make it more cheaper. And also I want to mention about the other benefit we got with the Commvault automation here is, so we have done some small automation using the Commvault workflow, which is have like tools to interact with the systems, database, Commvault, and virtual machines and different servers. So what we did is like we created a workflow and scheduled it to run it every half an hour, which will check if there are any servers, any backups running for the cloud instances. So if only when the resources are needed, we will bring up those servers. I'm speaking about the media agents. Not sure if some of you understand the term, but it's the one which controls the storage from the Commvault side, which writes the data into the storage. So we know from the workflows when to bring them up, when we need those resources. So we bring them up whenever we need it, and as soon as the backup's completed, we will shut down those resources, all the Commvault resources required for the backup, which saves us some amount of money. So, but in some other cases, like it might give more advantage for I mean, there is a capability to do a lot of things with that workflow and automation. That's what my point is. So that is the one of the benefits we got over there. And also the deduplication, we get around 85% of deduplication. We have more than 200 terabytes of full backup data, but when we write into the disk, we hardly write 32, 35 terabytes every weekly full backup. So I mean, sometimes we don't recognize the fact that we are getting a lot of benefits when it becomes the so basic feature of the product. But the deduplication is one of the great products and saves a lot of money for us. And it does Commvault does it very exceptionally, and with no impact on the backup timings and restore timings, which I very much like it. Obviously, now we have a different. I mean, these are the global solutions, and so we don't have to worry about purchasing a new server when we need it, new storage for the new backups when we come in. So we already have everything, so we have a peace of mind most of the times. Yeah. I think that concludes it. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, Uday. Thank you, Uday, very much. We appreciate you taking the time. Also, wanted everybody to be aware that a solutions brief has been made available for download, which will give you some additional Commvault information. We have a number of questions for the Q&A segment. The majority are directed towards Commvault, but I believe that there might be one AWS question. Yes, so there was a question about Snowball and Glacier and how that fits within the discussion today. When we highlighted the different AWS storage options, the idea was just to give you a brief overview of how those could be utilized for storage and backup purposes. When we look at a solution like Glacier, it really works with conjunction to S3 as far as lifecycle management. So if you have backups that are maybe 30 days old and you're ready to move those to more of a near-term recovery as opposed to real-time recovery model, you can migrate those over to Glacier, which gives you a lower cost structure. And the idea with Snowball is that not all of your data, sometimes you have such vast amounts of data to back up, to migrate to AWS. It may not always be feasible to manage that via upload. Maybe there's upload restrictions, it's just bandwidth speeds, that types of things. So it may just be easier to migrate your data to an intermediary device, which would then be sent to AWS for inclusion within the storage solution. So if there are additional questions, you can always reach out to AWS staff. Also, information can be found on aws.amazon.com under the storage services. For the rest of the Q&A segment, I believe Brian was looking to answer a few of those questions. Brian?
Thanks, Joe. And just to kind of pick up on the two there, because we've actually had a couple questions on Glacier. Let me hit Snowball first, because that's usually a getting data in. And just to give everybody a quick thumbnail, we come across a lot of customers like Uday that have existing environments. They may have a couple hundred terabytes of data that has all been deduplicated and kind of compacted on site. To your point, pushing a couple hundred terabytes over the wire is not an instantaneous action inside there. So that's where we've seen a lot of customers come back in, use the Snowball solution, get the device, put it on site. We'll go in and replicate all that data to the Snowball device. Take a day or two to kind of put it all into there. Ship the device back over to the AWS Datacenter. They'll stage that into your bucket. So now we have the first baseline there. From that point forward, we then just start doing the delta transfers. So it's a great way to say, if I have a couple hundred terabytes or if I have 500 terabytes or a petabyte, rather than waiting a week for it all to traverse over the wire, is there a faster way? And I jokingly say a week. I've had some customers that have, the dynamics of physics have potentially said that's a month or two for them. Coming into a Snowball is a fast way to get a lot of data staged up there quickly and then turn on the system on the wire to just basically update the deltas inside there on a regular basis. Turning to Glacier, Joe, just like you said, we have a lot of customers that will drop data into the S3 bucket first. That's the great one for active use. fast recovery, other kind of actions, or the SIA solution, as Uday was pointing out inside there. Sometimes when you've got retention policies of that month end or that quarter or that yearly compliance copy I need for my business requirements, it's got to be out there for 7 years. Those are great candidates to say, do we go move that over to Glacier? We offer you 2 methods. We do offer you the use the lifecycle policies under the covers there, or one of the integrations we introduced last year was a direct Glacier option too. So if you have some data sets that you need to go pack away, you don't have a lot of access needs for them, you can go in and you can tell us to drop it to the S3 bucket or directly put it into the Glacier bucket. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A over here is, if things are in Glacier, how do I get them back? When we first started the integration about 1.5 years ago, there was a little bit of a take a tool to kind of request things back in, but that's all been completely integrated now. So you tell us what data you're looking for. If there are data blocks that are sitting off in Glacier, we'll automatically go talk to Glacier, have them recalled back up, use them to affect whatever restore you need. It's a completely seamless process from your perspective inside there. So it's nice and easy, but we do always advise people in the different buckets inside there. You do have some different cost structures. Keep them in mind, and really the best data to go to Glacier is really that cold data. I need to retain it. I have very low intentions of accessing it. It's the best fit and form factor out there. Turning back to some of the other questions we had up online, and we'll do our best to try to get the comments back in on the emails here too, but let me just run down them while we have some time left. There were some questions on things like licensing. From the Commvault perspective, most of our licensing programs over the last several years have all included the ability to use cloud connectors. So coming in, and if I've got some data on site and I want to go off and put it into the cloud storage, no additional charges or licensing needed from the Commvault side. It's more of a matter of setting up your AWS account bucket on the other side, using our cloud library configuration, and you're off to the races. I would double check with your account teams if you've got some licensing models that date back 5 years, and that was the last time you bought from us. There may be something different there, but I'd venture to say that the majority of all of our currently licensed customers, this is a directly available option right off of your existing license set. A couple other questions around RDS. I did touch on it a little bit to one of our example slides on the different integration points. We have introduced RDS integration with our snapshot model. So if I have database instances running in RDS, some dev test or some other kind of workloads inside there, part of our snapshot management is to come in on a regular scheduled basis that you prescribe. I want a protection instance of that done on a daily basis, and you only want to keep 15 days or 20 days or 30 days, whatever your compliance policy is out inside there. That will happen automatically against the RDS instances, similar to if you want to do the same thing against an EC2 instance of full servers. That covers not only snapshot of the initial copy, but also if you would like to make a replica copy off to another availability zone. That way you cover yourselves against some of the DR and other kind of condition sets out there. Let me just dial down on the list over here. Question on the Glacier, on the API framework. Again, that was one of the new ones we introduced, and if I recall correctly, that was added about 6 months ago. If you look at our cloud connectors, you now have the option to either do S3, and then you could have a lifecycle policy behind there. We also offer Glacier as a direct connection now. So if you have some data sets, say you're importing and you want to put a lot of those old tape archives, and you want to go directly to Glacier inside there, you can set up a connection with us to go direct to Glacier. We'll take the data, encrypt packet, and then write it right off into the Glacier environment inside there directly. So like Uday said, you have all those options at your disposal. It's just a matter of setting up what kind of policy you want to use. one question over here, are there some specific integrations to leveraging Commvault to make it easier than using some of the EMC, Avamar data domain type platforms internally? Absolutely yes. In fact, even back to some of the comments that Uday had made earlier with Logitech. Logitech was an original implementation of Commvault in more of an on-prem model. Servers and open disk, all that nice deduplication locally inside there, which is really a cheaper, faster, more open approach than some of the sealed appliances inside market or the Avamars and data domains and so on and so forth. The nice thing about our model, it's portable. So as Uday described, in a lot of those cases, rather than having local server instances and backup infrastructure on site, we're also natively available to run inside cloud environments on an optimized basis. So I can go over and I can run my backup servers inside AWS, utilize all that great object storage inside S3 to control costs and everything else inside there, and be very portable by nature. That's not trying to go off and run a, call it a legacy appliance running on a server inside AWS, which can become a very expensive proposition with block storage and compute costs. We're very lean and cloud efficient of running our media server inside the cloud, utilizing all that blob storage for that cheap, efficient scale-out model inside there. And even a new option we're just turning on to that model of interest for cloud environments is some new power management features. So it's what we've been finding in a lot of the cloud environments, we can get the job done quite efficiently and quite quickly, rather than keep a media agent running all day long in your AWS EC2 instance. If we're not doing anything, we can put it to sleep. That way you're not getting charged compute charge on top of there. Later on, when we need to use it for backups or for data aging or restore operations, we'll power it up and wake it up automatically, do the operations, and again, put it back to sleep if you need to. It's some really interesting new approaches to IT. I think for all of us that have spent many years in the data center, we all feared the idea of ever turning off a server, that it may never power back on again. It's one of the great advantages we see in things like AWS Cloud. When we need it, we can use it. If I don't need it, I can put it back into an idle state. A couple more questions around things like EC2 instances and snapshots. Yes, very similar to what I talked about earlier around our RDS model. With AWS, if you come in to look at our online documentation, under our what we refer to as our virtual server protection methods, you'll see one virtual server for AWS inside there. And that covers things like if I want to do snap and replication management of the EC2 instances, or if I actually want to go and extract out a portable backup copy, indexed blocks, everything else inside there that I can put into that S3 pool, right off to the Glacier pool, or even take back to my data center if I need to go back and do other things with that at a different time. One of the questions coming up, what's the difference of this with things like Cloudberry? Definitely when you're looking at a Commvault environment, Commvault's pedigree is in enterprise. So when we look at the full breadth of enterprise workloads, everything else inside your data center, how do we magically allow you to connect and intersect that with AWS very efficiently? If you are only running in a cloud-first model, so the majority of your work is all being executed inside AWS. If you are very small scale, 10 servers or less, quite frankly, we may be an expensive solution to that kind of a model out there. We usually target more customers with, I'm going to say, 50 to 100 workloads, and then a larger majority of interconnection space, kind of like what Uday was describing to us before. So there's the very low end. Commvault really doesn't kind of position to some of those really low end. I just need a handful of servers inside there kind of a context. But when you start to really bring over some of those larger workloads, you start to look at multi-terabytes coming into the cloud inside there. I'm starting to look at snapshots and other kind of methodology I may need to start to intersect different cloud environments together. That is absolutely, where you're in, our sweet spot inside the market over there. I definitely entertain, having a discussion if you think there's some good interest with a couple of the folks inside our sales, and I think some of our marketing folks will be following up with folks on the WebEx today here too. Just being conscious, I think we've got maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and I'll just try to catch the last couple of questions here. What are some of the downsides? Good question over here. What are some of the downsides of going to cloud versus on-prem? I'll share with you, while all the services and everything else are very well known, cloud environments do operate at a different scale and performance from what you become used to inside your SAN environments. What we find with a lot of customers, come in, test out some of the different workloads, make sure you understand those conditions. Let's try some transfers back and forth inside there to get very familiar with it. Where we see material differences, that's where a lot of the Commvault innovation comes into play, of things like the deduplication and others that if I need to move lots of data across things that may have some higher latency on the bandwidth inside there, the smarter approach, like Uday said earlier, is move as little data as you can. So that's where things like client-side deduplication and other methods that have proven extremely successful in the data center translate very well into the cloud environments to say, how do I really take full advantage of trying to move as little data as possible, ensuring my policies are all done on a regular basis, trying to avoid scripting problems. I think it was one of the facets that Joe brought up earlier. It's not just about doing data movement. After it's done, can I verify it actually happened correctly? Can I go back in and verify the data in the copy is valid and clean? Can I go back in every 12 months and go back and verify that data is still in a clean, uncorrupted, usable state inside there? These are a lot of things we see in environments when you start to think beyond the, I need more than 5 days worth of just snapshot data copies, when I'm really starting to think about much more of an enterprise approach to protection that now extends naturally into my cloud environments. So why don't I stop there? I think there's a bunch more questions. We'll definitely take them offline and make sure everybody gets a good answer coming off of there. But love the interaction we had today. But I'll throw it back to Joe over here.
All right, thank you, Brian. Yep, there's a few questions outstanding. Those will be answered via email. I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's session, and thank you, Brian and Uday, for presenting. If there are any questions, always feel free to reach out to Commvault, Logitech, or AWS, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thanks a lot.